Peter?
When you say Cuba is next,
Cuba.
is Cuba, whatever you do with the military there, it seems like something, will that look more like Iran or Venezuela?
Can't tell you that. I can tell you that they're talking to us. It's a failed nation. They have no money, they have no oil, they have no nothing. They have nice land. They have nice landscape, you know. It's a beautiful island, but I think Cuba's the end. You know, all my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. You know, when will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time.
Wow. Have you guys noticed that Donald Trump talks about these countries like he talks about women? Have you guys noticed that? I'll take it if I want it. You know, this sounds a whole lot like grab them by the meow meow. That's what that sounds like. It's the same kind of cavalier attitude. Yeah, I'll just take what I want. There's nothing you can do about it. Just lay back and enjoy it. But I fear that Donald Trump don't know the Cuban people. He really does not. They are not like his friends on Epstein Island. They are not like a lot of his victims, should I say, on Epstein Island. Alleged victims on Epstein Island. Let's protect ourselves here a little bit. Yeah, I don't think Cuba is going out without a fight. That's just my personal opinion. But I don't know if you guys have heard recently, but the United States has basically helped plunge Cuba into the darkness by cutting off all oil imports from Venezuela, which was helping keep Cuba going, basically. And they've plunged the entire island into darkness. They plunged the entire island into darkness. Babies are being born, and the incubators don't have any power in Cuba as we speak. This is a crime, what our government is doing to Cuba as we speak. One of the most egregious, most criminal acts of imperialism that maybe the world has ever seen. And that's, I mean, it seems like we're saying that a lot recently, especially with this administration, but it's just the God's honest truth. You know, this administration has been the most openly lawless and reckless administration that we've had. They're all imperialist. And I need you to understand that. I don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans. They're all imperialist. They all have helped contribute to this situation in some way. But Donald Trump is just a more honest representation of how ugly the ruling class in this country is. So just to show you how long this has been going on, the United States tormenting Cuba in the name of the Monroe Doctrine, the idea that the United States get to control the entire Western Hemisphere. This goes all the way back to the 1800s. Going back to the 1820s, U.S. leaders repeatedly expressed interest in acquiring Cuba from Spain. This would culminate in the Spanish-American War of 1898, where the U.S. would actually intervene in Cuba's war for independence against Spain. And when Spain was defeated, Cuba thought it was free, but when you're dealing with Uncle Sam, you're never free. You're never free. Our government literally occupied Cuba in 1898 until 1902. The U.S. government directly governed Cuba for 4 years. That's how you ended up with the Platt Amendment, which gave the United States the right to intervene in Cuban affairs. And that's when we also established the lease for the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, which we run to this day. We would occupy Cuba again in 1906, between 1906 and 1909. So this is not anything new. This is what our government has been doing for a long time. This is what I always tell people for many years about Trump. Trump is just the honest, open version of who these people have always been. This is who these people have always been. They've always been imperialists. They've always been white supremacists and racists. They've always been criminals. They've always been rapists. They've always been child, touchers. Okay? All of them. You go back to the original presidents, and 12 of the first 18 of them owned slaves. Go back to Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus is the most prolific pedophile maybe the world has ever seen. He makes Jeffrey Epstein look like Mr. Rogers. And think about how many schools and buildings are named after him. And how many cities are named after Christopher Columbus. And so you have the Platt Amendment that gave the U.S. the right to intervene in Cuba's affairs. From the 1930s to the 1950s, you have the end of the Platt Amendment, but the U.S. was still very much controlling the island up through the term of Fulgencio Batista, who was a dictator. Now, the irony is you have people like Ted Cruz and all of them who swear that, like, Castro was the one who ran their families out of Cuba. Batista ran Ted Cruz's family out of Cuba, not Fidel Castro. Ted Cruz's family left in like the mid-50s or something. And so at this point, when Batista was in power, American businesses and American gangsters, sometimes one and the same, were really dominating Cuba as an island. I don't think people really understand the level of debauchery that our government and our business communities, and even a lot of our celebrities, people like Marlon Brando and all those people go down to Cuba. Cuba was literally considered the brothel of the Caribbean. It was literally called the brothel of the Caribbean under Batista. People would go, it was like how you hear about in Thailand and places like that, where Americans would go down there to commit sexual abuse against children. And they would go to watch live sex shows, sometimes with humans, sometimes with animals. And they had casinos there for gambling and prostitution at astronomical numbers. That's why it was the brothel of the Caribbean. That is what Donald Trump and all of his friends who talk about, oh, Cuba's going to be, that's what they want to bring back. And that's what they want to bring to Iran, too. They want to turn all their daughters into OnlyFans models, like all the women of a certain age in this country are OnlyFans models. And I'm calling them models, but let's just be what they are, sex workers. OnlyFans sex workers. The goal for them is to once again go back to Cuba being the brothel of the Caribbean, full of drugs, alcohol, debauchery, while American companies hoover up all of their resources and make billions and billions of dollars cutting the Cuban people out of the deal itself. And so Fidel Castro would take power in 1959. Initially, the United States would recognize the government, but the tensions rose quickly, especially once Fidel became a communist and sort of converted Cuba over to communism. The embargo, the criminal embargo that virtually every country in the world condemns, begins in 1960. And it is indeed a criminal embargo. Most of the countries of the world want nothing to do with it. Nothing. Most of the countries of the world in the UN regularly vote against the embargo that we have on Cuba. Virtually all of them. But we've continued it for many, many years. And so this is a big part of that. A lot of it happened after Cuba started nationalizing American-owned businesses. And you get the Helms-Burton Act, which would actually extend embargo penalties globally. Now, a lot of people would say, well, why doesn't Cuba just do business with other countries? Well, because they can't. The U.S. literally says and has named Cuba to be a state-sanctioned sponsor of terrorism. A state-sanctioned sponsor of terrorism. That means that anybody who does business with Cuba is helping a state sponsor of terrorism, and we actually get to, they open themselves up to sanctions. So mind you, this is why every year, every single nation in the world just about votes against the blockade against Cuba. Usually it's every country in the world and the United States and Israel. That's usually what it is. The United States and Israel versus the entire world. And so this embargo has had horrific effects on the Cuban people and the Cuban economy. Cuba is cut off from not only American markets, but to any of the global systems tied to the United States, the most powerful and richest country on the planet. They have shortages of everything. They have limited access to advanced machinery, spare parts, medical equipment. That's why you see people riding around in cars from the 50s. That's all they got. That is all they got. That's all they got. They have nothing else. We won't allow them to have anything else. There was a point when the Soviet Union was around where they actually were being, kept afloat by the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s, obviously Cuba's GDP would drop dramatically. There would be severe shortages of food and fuel and electricity. That's why you would see so many people flooding into Miami in the 90s. But other than the embargo, the U.S. would not just, try to cut Cuba off financially. It would try to literally disable and destabilize the entire country itself. In 1961, you had the Bay of Pigs fiasco, where you had 1,400 CIA-trained Cuban exiles land in Cuba, and they tried to spark an uprising against Fidel Castro, which was quickly defeated by the Cuban people who did not want it. This became a huge embarrassment for the United States. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, in which the United States almost ended the world. We almost ended the world in 1962 because we found out that the Soviet Union were keeping missiles in Cuba, nuclear missiles. This almost leads to nuclear war. Thank God the Soviet Union had the cooler head and decided to withdraw, and the U.S. pledged not to invade Cuba. Now, for everybody who's keeping score at home, that's exactly Vladimir Putin's argument in Ukraine. We're trying to put nukes right on Vladimir Putin's border in Ukraine so that we can obviously destabilize Russia, overthrow Russia's government. That's been the plan for many years, at least since the 2000s. And so Putin invaded and said, look, I can't let you guys arm Ukraine like this while you're on our border. When we do it, it's okay. When they do it, it's not. Just saying. You had Operation Mongoose from 1961 to 1963, which was a massive secret campaign that included industrial sabotage. They actually got people to sabotage the crops to feed the Cuban people and factories in Cuba. They tried to, once again, get the Cuban people to rise up and overthrow the government. They refused to do it. They tried to assassinate Fidel Castro 638 times. They literally tried to assassinate Fidel Castro 638 times, and that is hilarious, but it's true. It's absolutely true. We did everything possible to try to get rid of Fidel and could not do it. We couldn't do it. $638 times. We tried to send him cigars that would blow up. We tried to send him cigars that would blow up. Like, seriously, we literally tried to send him cigars that would blow up, which is hilarious to me. We tried to, one time we actually got a woman who, to seduce Fidel Castro. We tried to get like a very beautiful woman to seduce Fidel. And the funny thing is that Fidel ended up seducing the woman, and she turned against the U.S. and told him that she was there to assassinate him. So yeah, Fidel had it like that. Fidel had it like that. So there was a little bit of a thaw under Jimmy Carter in the 70s. There were diplomatic offices opened in Cuba and the United States. In 1980, you have the Mario boat lift, where Fidel Castro just said, hey, he opened up the prisons and everything else. Said, here you go, have at it. And that's how you ended up with Miami as the murder capital in the 80s. That's how you end up with Miami Vice and the perception of Miami as a vice city. There would not be any diplomatic thawing until Obama. There was between 2014 and 2016, there was normalization, diplomatic relations restored, travel and trade restrictions eased. Obama actually visited Cuba, if you can remember. One of the coolest things Obama did as president, I give credit where credit is due. He definitely thawed some of the long-held restrictions against Cuba. He thawed the relations and got rid of some of those restrictions, but Donald Trump came in, and because he was just intent on doing anything the opposite of what Barack Obama did, he reversed a lot of those Obama-era policies. He tightened sanctions and travel restrictions. Joe Biden basically upheld what Trump did, because of course he did. But a big question is why? Why are they so obsessed? Why do they hate Cuba so much? And a big part of the reason is that Cuba has played a disproportionately large and influential role in the anti-apartheid struggle in Africa and in anti-imperialist movements all over the world. That is why they hate Cuba so much. That they were a part of the anti-apartheid struggle in Southern Africa. They helped Angola gain independence from Portugal. Cuba actually intervened on behalf of Angola's government, and Cubans fought against the apartheid government of South Africa, and of course the United States, who supported Portugal in their colonialist endeavors. Cuba also supported the ANC, Nelson Mandela. They provided military weapons and training and political support. So guess what? Nelson Mandela would praise Cuba. Listen to what Nelson himself had to say about Fidel Castro and his contributions to the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa.
Y nuestro amigo Cuba,
which helped us in training our people,
que nos ayudó a entrenar a nuestra gente,
gave us resources to
que nos
get
dio
on with our
recursos,
struggle,
que nos ayudaron tanto en nuestra
trained
lucha,
our people
que
as
entrenó a nuestros
doctors and so
combatientes, a
on.
nuestros médicos.
You have not come to our country.
Cuba no ha venido a visitarnos, usted no ha ido a visitarnos.
When are you coming?
¿Cuándo viene?
No he visitado a mi patria
I
surafricana.
haven't visited my South African homeland
La
yet.
quiero como una patria.
I love it as a
Pero por él.
homeland.
That's Cuba. That's Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro having a discussion. Nelson Mandela is asking Fidel Castro to please come to South Africa so that they can thank him.
Y por el pueblo.
I love it as a homeland as I love you and the South
When
African
are you
people.
coming to South
Pero
Africa?
¿cuándo viene a Sudáfrica?
Creo que va a tener que ser hoy mismo. Va a
I
tener
think it
que
will have to be today. I will have to fly back with you.
No, you are very
Él se
soon.
va a las 10.
You are leaving at 10, so we are catching the plane together.
Soon afterwards, Fidel did go to South Africa and on his way stop off in Namibia, where he was greeted by Sam Nujoma, the nation's leader.
Welcome to the Republic of Namibia,
Bienvenido a la República de Namibia.
the country which you helped to liberate, to be liberated.
In South Africa, Mandela was waiting. Fidel was invited to address the South African Parliament.
Conviértase Sudáfrica en modelo de un mundo futuro más justo y más humano.
Let South Africa be a model of a more just and more humane future.
So that's Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela. At the end, you heard Fidel Castro addressing the South African Congress. They gave him a standing ovation because he is one of the main partners they had in getting free from the apartheid government of South Africa that we supported. Mind you, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher in the UK called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. Fidel Castro is the one who called Nelson Mandela a friend. Yes. And don't get me, like, Mandela was pretty adamant about his feelings about Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. I love this clip just for kicks. I love this clip where Nelson Mandela literally goes off on a journalist who tries to tell him who he can be cool with.
A man who changes his principles depending on with whom he is dealing is not a man who can lead a nation. The context was this: what principle are you being asked to change, you, Mr. Mandela, when Americans question your praise for the human rights under Gaddafi and Castro? What is the principle involved there that you're being asked to change?
Mr. McNeil, this is a matter which should not be handled lightly, as many people do. The first country which we approached in the 60s for assistance when our leaders had to leave the country in order to mobilize the support of the international community. The first country we approached was the United States of America. We could not even succeed to come close to the government, and they refused to assist us. But Cuba, the moment we appealed for assistance, they were ready to do so, and they did so. Why would we now listen to the Western world when they say we should have nothing to do with Cuba? It's just unreasonable. No human being acts in that particular fashion. Here is the country that was the first to assist us when the West, which had formidable resources, was actually supporting the government. Now you expect us to change our whole approach and to start condemning Cuba for what is supposed to be happening inside the country. No man of principles could ever do that.
Let him have it, bro. Let him have it. That's Nelson Mandela telling Americans basically to mind their own damn business. We tried to get you to be on our side against apartheid, but you had your own apartheid state called the Jim Crow South. Who are you to tell people how to run their country? You inspired apartheid South Africa. You inspired the Nazis. Hitler got his ideas from this country. And so does the apartheid state in Israel as it exists right now. That came from the Jim Crow South. And for all y'all who don't know, the police in this country that whoop us as black people upside our head every day, many of them are trained by the Israeli IDF. So remember who was on the right side and who was on the wrong side. Who supported anti-imperialism? Who supported the anti-apartheid struggle? People like Nelson Mandela and the ANC. And who supported white supremacy every step of the way? The United States. The United States. People go, how could the United States elect Donald Trump? How could the United States not elect Donald Trump? Seriously, how could the United States not vote for somebody like Donald Trump? This is who the United States has always been. And Nelson Mandela knew it, and Gaddafi knew it, and all those other people they tell you to hate knew it as well. And they're making Venezuela pay for it. They tried to make Hugo Chavez pay for it. They kidnapped him at one point, but the Venezuelan people demanded their president back, so they just ended up kidnapping his successor. Nicolas Maduro, for the same reason. Whose side has Maduro been on? The anti-imperialist struggle. Who has the United States been supporting? Imperialism, apartheid, just like we have in this country. But before we go to a break, I know it's 6:45 almost. I just want to go down the line of some of the accomplishments of the Cuban government in spite of having some of the most sanctions against them of any country in the world and being basically cut off from the world economically. Cuba is the only country in the Americas without child malnourishment. The only country, including America. It was declared an international paradise for infants by UNICEF. It has the lowest child death rate in the Americas. 130,000 medical school graduates since 1961. The student-teacher ratio in Cuba is 10-1. They have eliminated homelessness. They've developed 4 vaccines against cancer. Over half of their national budget is used for social services for the people. They have sent 800 doctors and nurses to Liberia and Guinea during the Ebola outbreak. They have the best education system in Latin America. They have one of the best human development indexes in the world. And they are the first country to eliminate mother-to-child transmission of HIV. They did all that while the United States, the 800-pound gorilla, the supporter of apartheid and imperialist movements all over the world, has been doing everything in their power to break them. So, just like I support labor in this country, I support the anti-imperialist in Cuba. My support goes with them. And if you have any morals or values or whatsoever, yours should as well. All right, folks. Now we got that out of the way. It's cancel time. I'm about to go into the allegations against civil rights icon, labor rights icon Cesar Chavez. And should allegations, without any evidence or proof or any type of trial or anything, destroy a legacy? We'll be right back after these.